A light topic for a Friday. Always great to have Dr. Robert Malone back on. We could talk horses because we're both horse owners, but we're not. We're going to talk about, well, some people think they're the horsemen, like the 12 horsemen of the apocalypse or something, Dr. Malone. That's the CIA. So you recently presented this a couple times, actually. And I want to refer people over to your Substack so they can watch it for themselves, because we're not going to get into all of this, but you can watch it in its entirety: mRNA vaccines, the CIA, and national defense. And Dr. Malone's here to talk a little bit about it. Dr. Malone, let's start at the beginning. Why are you an authority on this topic? Why should we listen to you at all?
So there's kind of two threads on that. One is that, yes, when I was 28, I did a series of experiments, had a series of insights and discoveries that led to 9 issued patents that were all the property of a company that I was working for after I left the Salk Institute, called Vical. And just to put to rest, those, I did not receive any compensation for those patents. I am not a multimillionaire. I've not received millions of dollars from pharma, even though these 9 patents were the original descriptors, disclosures, and included the original proof of concept, including for both influenza vaccination and AIDS vaccination of mRNA as vaccines. And this technology largely came out of my head and off of my bench to the point of where it was at in 1990. And then I did many subsequent studies as an academic discovery researcher that are relevant to this through the 90s in particular. But I did, in fact, and you can look at the patents and the patent disclosures on that are covered on the MaloneInstitute.org and judge for yourself. I did not invent these vaccines. I did not participate in the development of these mRNA vaccines. There have been further modifications or improvements in the technology and the disclosure inventions, particularly by Carrico and Weissman and a group in University of British Columbia. But that doesn't negate the fact, as they say, just because the 747 was developed by Boeing does not mean that the Wright brothers didn't invent the airplane in powered flight. So that's that. Then the other reason why I have insight into our topic area today is because although I spent the first decade of my career working within the NIH system and National Science Association, NSA, and many others in with commerce in developing these technologies. Since the anthrax attacks, I became a specialist after I started working for Dynport Vaccine Company in biodefense as the whole biodefense industrial complex exploded. And I'm very familiar with both NIH and DoD programs. I've quite literally won many billions of dollars in contracts for my clients. That doesn't mean I received billions of dollars. They just paid me my hourly rate as a consultant. But I've been deeply embedded in building logic proposals, managing, and serving on study sections, often as study section chair for contract proposals that are typically in the $20 million to $150 million range for NIH in the biodefense space. So I get the government. I have been security cleared at the secret level, so that's a fairly low level, by Department of Defense. And through the first third of this outbreak, worked closely with Defense Threat Reduction Agency, Chem Biodefense Branch, in particularly focused on drug repurposing for treatment of COVID disease. And that included the development of the drug combinations of famotidine plus celecoxib, and famotidine plus celecoxib plus ivermectin. But what's really brought me to public awareness since the Dark Horse podcast with Brett Weinstein and Steve Kirsch so long ago, and the famous initial interviews with this journalist named Alison Morrow, has been my efforts to try to help people to understand the mRNA vaccine technology and its stage of development, the risks associated with it, the bioethics of what's been done, and increasingly other issues relating to that.
So you've been really demonized, I think, by the media, the corporate media. You don't have to do much research on your name to see like the disinformation agent and who is Robert Malone, all that stuff. But then, Dr. Malone, you also get on the other side, you get the controlled opposition. So I want you to actually talk a little bit about that in a second. But I first want to go into the basics of this. And like I said, for folks who want to get into the topic really in depth, follow Dr. Malone on Substack. He also has a website, right? It's robertmalonemd.com, I believe.
And increasingly maloneinstitute.org.
Okay. So go check all those out. And he's on, well, no, you're not on Twitter anymore because they banned you. You came on to talk about that, right?
Yeah, I got banned from Twitter and LinkedIn immediately prior to the Joe Rogan broadcast.
Fascinating how all that works. Did you hear that PayPal reinstated its $2,500 fine for misinformation?
I did. And
for anything, but it includes that. It includes
put a panel into our Friday Funnies today that refers to this specifically.
Okay. So all right. So let's do this. The CIA and National Defense related to mRNA vaccines. Give us the I don't know, college 100 level class on this, and then people can go deep dive on your website.
So to start, to really dive into this, you need to understand the logic, whether it's valid or not, the logic structure that the biodefense enterprise and the intelligence community have built around the need for medical countermeasures for both engineered pathogens and emerging infectious disease. The high-level example that illustrates this is that it is quite literally the CIA, through its development arm called DARPA, Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, functionally pulled the mRNA vaccine technology out of the trash can after the patents that I had filed with others had expired. They had been, the ability of anyone to use those patents for RNA had been suppressed by Merck and then Vical, who owned those patents, and were pursuing DNA vaccines, which are also covered by the same patents. And after they expired, DARPA initiated investment programs, development programs that capitalized Moderna. Moderna is absolutely a product of CIA investment through DARPA to enable a whole new technology platform that would allow rapid production of vaccines or other medical countermeasures by going direct from gene to vaccine, from the sequence of a virus to the ability to immediately manufacture a vaccine. That's the goal. And so that's kind of the modern embodiment. And now further, they continue to support it. And the CIA venture capital firm, investment firm called In-Q-Tel. It's important to understand that the CIA is now functionally independent in many ways from the federal government. They have their own very large venture capital firm, and they can do with what they wish. And that was the entity that funded the new mRNA manufacturing facility up in Canada that is being headed up by Rahul Singhvi, formerly CEO of Novavax, for making mRNA. So they basically catalyzed the development of this technology, commercialization, and then now are capitalizing manufacturing capacity to continue to be able to produce these products. So that's the high level punchline in terms of the current products. And then the deeper issue is, how did we get here, and what is the underlying logic? And is it all just about depopulation? The answer is no. What is the driver? What is the logic supporting the intelligence community and the U.S. government making investments in this technology?
Let's get into that, because I think we were talking about this before we went live, but you know, when I tell people that the vast majority of sort of the stormtroopers, people are kind of over my Star Wars analogies, but I don't have a better one, honestly. But when I tell people that the vast majority of the stormtroopers have a sense of benevolence about them, they're not sitting back like, you know, in corporate news going, oh, I know it's one thing, but I'm going to tell people the other thing because I really want to, I want to take over the world. They've convinced themselves they're doing something that has a great good, which I don't necessarily think is any less evil. In fact, I think, you know, in a lot of ways it can end up leading to worse evil, because as my old friend, no, I wish I knew him, but C.S. Lewis once wrote that he would rather live under a robber baron than a moral busybody, because at least a robber baron's cupidity will sleep sometimes, but a moral busybody will torture you with the approval of their own conscience. And I think I read some of that in what you've written. So can you explain that a little bit?
Yeah, if I can adjust my shirt here, it seems I seem to be all askew.
We're casual here, everyone.
So,
I got a newborn and a 2-year-old producer in the control room with the babysitter who almost had to cancel last minute. So Dr. Malone's ready for any nuclear options here. All right, go ahead, Dr. Malone.
And I recommend for your viewers RFK's follow-up book to the real Anthony Fauci that he's in the last stages of editing right now. This is Bobby Kennedy Jr. And it is focused on the Wuhan story and the suppression of that story, but it goes much deeper into the whole history of the biodefense enterprise. And to understand what's going on here, you really have to reel back in time to World War II. And during World War II, the Japanese government absolutely focused on the development and testing of a variety of biowarfare agents. They were one of the first governmental entities to really take biowarfare to operationalize it and to build bioweapons. Tularemia was one example. And apparently, during the war, they built industrial manufacturing facilities and camps where they would use prisoners. They actually, those were among the healthiest prisoners. The Japanese war camps were notorious for starving people, but they kept these prisoners very healthy. And because they wanted to make sure that they had data that was from healthy humans. And so they were well fed, kept in their little cells, and they would have to stick their arms out through a hole, apparently, and get inoculated with whatever engineered pathogen the Japanese war machine was busy developing and testing. And this went on. Apparently, some of those agents after the war were brought back to the United States and were deployed during the Korean War by the American government, and resulted in a certain amount of blowback where American soldiers got infected with the pathogen that had been deployed on the North Koreans. There's this long history of biowar and development of bioweapons. And of course, it goes way back. We could cite the use of blankets that had been used on patients with smallpox, being provided to First Nations people in North America to facilitate the spread of smallpox, which they're very susceptible to. I mean, there's a long, long history of using infectious disease for warfare purposes. And just to kind of help frame this, currently, the efforts to develop vaccines by the U.S. Department of Defense and the NIAID now. NIAID, under Tony Fauci, has largely taken over control of much of this mission space from the Department of Defense after the anthrax attacks, under the logic that the DoD was not efficient at developing products, and NIAID, under Tony Fauci's control, could do it much more efficiently. This is the reason why Tony got that huge salary boost. Is Dr. Fauci is not, he's presented to all of us as the head of the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Disease, but in fact, he sits on top of a major empire that crosses both Department of Defense and NIAID, and is really the federal arm of the whole military industrial biodefense complex, which has gotten huge. So Tony sits at the top of all of that.
That explains so much.
Yeah, no, he's deeply involved in the intelligence community. And in fact, the NIH has just not launched a new division called ARPA-H, which is explicitly built around the processes and contracting procedures and structure of DARPA, I mentioned a moment ago, the CIA's development arm. So there's now a parallel arm embedded within NIH called ARPA-H that seems to be primarily focused on transhumanism agendas. So this is the brain implants and biometrics and so many other things. And we've written a Substack about this, about ARPA-H. You can find it in there. And I tracked down the actual budget line item for appropriations for ARPA-H, and it is a single line. And it basically says funding for ARPA-H, and then over in the right-hand column, $1 billion. That's it. That's their total budget for year one. That's for year one.
Wow.
So created out of whole cloth, and now headed up by somebody who has a multi-year track record at DARPA and other closely related government intelligence development programs. So
there was a.
If I okay, I keep getting off track. I apologize, Allison.
That's okay.
So we're on track to develop effective vaccines, if nothing goes wrong, for all of the known biowarfare agents up until the end of World War II. And if all proceeds according to current plans, which of course it never does, we will have all those vaccines completed by 2050, a full century after the threats manifested. So I just want to make the point with that our current processes, from the point of view of the government, are absolutely inadequate to meet the threat of emerging infectious disease, largely driven by environmental disruption in forests, etc., rainforests, as well as the threat of engineered biopathogens. And we've seen just one small example of the power of modern pathogen bioengineering or gain-of-function research over the last 3 years, coming out of the Wuhan Institute of Virology. Over.
Okay. There was a question on ROKFIN, which I want to throw your way, about somebody who watched your lecture but said the question is, China did not adopt these, and yet they were intimately involved. Why that work was done there? But can you first stand by for a second while I promote my Malbecs? China was not involved in making these. I can assure you of that. They are from Argentina and from very high remote regions, and you get 50% off the wine and 50% off shipping. And the holidays are upon us, so what better when you have folks over for Thanksgiving, if we're still allowed to celebrate that? Not sure. You can celebrate with free speech wine, which also supports my work. What better than to tell grandma, who you finally made amends with because she voted the way you didn't want her to, and she also did something with the vaccine you didn't want her to do, but now you've repaired things because you've been watching Allison's channel and you've heard all these different perspectives, and you're like, you know what? I'm going to refriend grandma on Facebook. I'm going to invite her over for Thanksgiving, and I'm going to get totally drunk with her off of AllisonWinePromo.com. No, I'm just totally drunk. I get migraines if I have more than a glass of wine. But anyway, go get 50% off some amazing wines, 50% off shipping. Like I said, can't get them at the grocery store. And why would you want to? Some of them have never even been imported before to the US, so they're very unique. You can also get some coffee. You get 10% off your first order at twinenginecoffee.com/Allison. These are organic roast, light roast, dark roast. I actually got an espresso machine for Christmas. My mom's shipping it right now. She's ahead of the game because I need it now because I have a newborn. So I'm going to be drinking the espresso roast, which is right here. But there's also medium roast. There's tea as well. If you're into tea, there's a Katura tea. It's tea you make from the coffee fruit. And like I said, these are also high altitude. They're also organic, and you can support my work. Both of my companies that I work with support free speech, which is not easy to necessarily find nowadays. So, all right, there's my pitch. Do you want to take the China
question? Let me add to your pitch, Allison. I first heard about high altitude Malbec on our first broadcast.
Now what do you think?
Since then, it's generally not a cheap date in my experience. It is absolutely my favorite red. I love the complexity, the lack of, it generally doesn't have too much tannin while still having a lot of complexity. And my experience has been all over the world as I've been traveling. This is an opinion held by a lot of people that understand wine. The other day, we were talking about horses, you and me, just before this, and it's a common passion we share. And we had a judge over from Portugal, which generally Portuguese folks understand red wine pretty well. And so he did the inspection for one of our mares and our junior stallion. That all went really well. But we took him out to dinner, and he absolutely loved the high altitude Malbec that we had with dinner. Unfortunately, it was about 150 a bottle.
Ouch.
The other thing I wanted to add is that not many people are aware that there was a massive subsea volcano explosion in the Southern Hemisphere just a few months ago. And it has kicked up a huge amount of ash and water vapor. And it's circulating in the Southern Hemisphere right now. Mm-hmm. It's on track to drop the temperature by about 1 degree. And why does that matter? What it's doing is it's destroying all of the high altitude crops in the Southern Hemisphere. And in particular, the coffee crop. And I just suggest for your audience's consideration that they might want to anticipate some supply challenges for good coffee. And I can tell you that here in our household, we're stocking up because it's an essential medicine. But I suggest that now's the time to think about stockpiling these things, because a year from now, they may be getting hard to find.
That's interesting, because I've had people on talking about food shortages. I never knew there might be a wine or coffee shortage. That's too bad. I'll have to check in with my sponsors and see how things are going. That's interesting. I did not know that. I should tell people too, again, as Dr. Malone brings up, these would be very expensive, but you get 50% off the bottles, and you also get 50% off the shipping. And you get a free bottle of wine, actually, when you sign up. If you sign up for the wine club, you don't have to do that if you want to just get the 3 in my trio, but they'll send you all kinds of updates on new exclusive wines. And they're not even high altitude. They're extreme altitude, like one's from 9,000 feet, which is very rare to find. So thank you for helping me on that one, Dr. Malone. Do you think that you could talk about the China question on YouTube? Is that something that you don't think we'll get dinged for? What do you think?
I don't know. I have another podcaster that I go on with fairly frequently, Tommy Kerrigan. He does Tommy's podcast. He's a younger man, which is part of why I started going with him, interviewing with him, is I was trying to reach a younger audience. And since Elon purchased Twitter, he has seen a major explosion in the Rumble feeds that he's posted over the last few years. Traffic is up 200%. I
Maybe
don't
we
know
should
about,
save it. You're saying we should
pardon?
save it because we have 1,000 people watching on Rumble and only 325 watching on YouTube. So maybe we should just save it for Rumble and ROKFIN. Should we do that? And you know what? I got a couple super chats from not a banned account or not a banned account. One about newborns and the vaccines, and then also since the CIA is trusted, we should trust mRNA. The questions we're going to take definitely on the other platforms, but so maybe we should do that. The China question I thought was maybe, but the question specific to the vaccines, I want to make sure we take on the other platforms. Maybe we should wrap it up, Dr. Malone.
We can talk about the China question in a general sense. I think it's now accepted to discuss the lab leak hypothesis. That's within the range of accepted journalism discourse. One of the things that I think I was the one that first broke this, and corporate media has not really taken it up. The threat mitigation branch of Defense Threat Reduction Agency, this is full-on DoD, this is not CIA. And the threat mitigation branch of DITRA is the group that was kind of founded to scoop up the loose nukes in the former Soviet Union back in the day after the collapse. And they have been funding the Wuhan Institute of Virology for many years, and they continue to fund. So the whole storyline that this is all about Tony Fauci and the NIAID is not true. And the logic has been, as always within threat mitigation, that if we provide funding for, at least this is the official logic, if we provide funding for the likes of the Batwoman and her associates at the Wuhan Institute of Virology, they are less likely to go and work in private employment or for nefarious third-party actors. Personally, I think that's grossly naive, and I suspect it's a limited hangout cover story. My opinion is that our belief system that the U.S. intelligence community and the U.S. biodefense community are separate and view the Chinese Communist Party as hostiles is not really accurate.
Mm-hmm.
There's long-standing collaborative activity, and we know that now because of the transfer of technology and materials from Barrick, UNC, EcoHealth Alliance into Wuhan Institute of Virology.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you bring up a point I wanted to ask you about. I think I'm going to cut the YouTube stream, but I wanted you to talk a little bit about that because I think it seems like a manipulation of politicians and the media I'm not really quite sure what the point is to get people to hate China when it seems like behind the scenes they're all working with China. It just seems like a big mind game. But let's continue this just to give the perks to the people who are subscribing on the other platforms. Go over there. Thanks for watching on YouTube, and don't forget to go over to Dr. Malone's Substack or to his website and check out my sponsors and